So the photography game started for me very young. I'm an only child, and I grew up very much an introvert. How many of you guys are introverts in the room? Yes, artists, that artist deal. It's like we love to be extroverted during a shoot, but I love to come home and gain most of my energy, from being alone and being creative and really, getting those creative juices flowing. For me, photography really is the outward expression of inner significance. Anything that you have the power, anything that you can dream up, you have the power to create, and that's what I love so much about photography. And I'm going to get into a lot of the different tips and tricks along the way of what I've learned in fashion photography and how to take your portraits to the next level. But I'm going to also go through a very exciting launch for Nikon that just happened at midnight, and I'm sure you guys are aware of that. So, it's interesting because, I grew up, my dad gave me my first camera, the Nikon FG. How many of you guys are actually portrait photographers? Okay, cool. Weddings? Okay, fashion? Okay, right on, that's awesome. I like to kind of get an idea of my audience before I get into it. So ultimately, my dad gave me my first camera when I was 12, and I completely fell in love with photography. At 16, I ended up working with some Little League photographers, so I shot all of the sports teams for a whopping $10 an hour. And at 17, I went off to college, and I ended up studying entrepreneurship as opposed to just photography, because I figured out I really needed to know that business side of things in order to actually make a living doing photography. So if you are interested in getting in photography, I think it's really important to learn that business side. And ultimately, the camera felt like a little bit rebellious to me. It felt like I finally had a sidekick in exploring the world. I was very, very shy growing up, believe it or not. I know I'm on stage here for you guys today, but I'm very much a shy personality. Photography has really gotten me out of my shell and helped me gain my confidence, and it's just been such a good journey. My senior year, I ended up studying abroad with a world-renowned fashion photographer, Jeff Licata. He's actually in New York City. Amazing, amazing photographer, and that is when I completely fell in love with fashion photography and bringing to life, those fashion art forms and transforming the portraits into fashion photography. Because at the time, I was only shooting friends and family, and I had a mentor of mine, Eddie Tapp. He reviewed my portfolio one day, and he said, "Dixie, your work is there, but you're not using real models. You're only using, just friends and family, and so it doesn't have that fashion kind of look to it." And so he's like, if you start shooting real models, start working with the different agencies, it's going to automatically take your work to that next level. So I ended up going home, and I reached out to some of the local agencies, and I asked to shoot some of their new faces. And that was like a really great moment because they loved my work. They allowed me to shoot some of the new faces for free. And that's really how I built my fashion portfolio. So if you guys are interested in shooting different fashion models, you can actually reach out to the agencies wherever you live and work with them to create some new images for their new faces, because every model needs stuff for their new comp cards and whatnot. So it's a really, really great tool. And it was funny because when I was studying abroad, sometimes it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission. We're just shooting all around London. I'm at Tower Bridge, and you have this beautiful Tower Bridge in the background, and we're shooting. We kind of hopped a fence, and we started photographing one of the models there. And little did I know, 10 minutes later, or 15 minutes later, the cops showed up. And apparently, Hugh Jackman lived in the apartment above where we were shooting, and they thought that our team was the paparazzi trying to photograph Hugh Jackman. It's like you just never know with photography what kind of little adventures you're going to get yourself into. Luckily, I didn't get arrested, but it's definitely an adventure. Fashion photography is the ultimate dream for me. I mean, I love black and white. One of my very first jobs was actually shooting for HDNet, which is now Access Television. So it was a docu-reality travel show, and we got to shoot all of the swimsuit models for this travel show. And I did that for about 4 years. So I spent so much time in like Ibiza, Spain, and Miami and Puerto Rico shooting for the show. But what I found was interesting is the the cinematographer on this particular production noticed that the models were really comfortable with me. And so he ended up letting me direct the models for the TV show. And so that was sort of like a first moment in order to get into directing and what it's like to work with talent and making them feel comfortable in the lens. And that's kind of what I tend to specialize in now moving forward. So it's definitely been a big adventure. One of my first jobs was shooting for Magpul. This is actually, they make the arms for the military, and they wanted a high fashion calendar. And this was actually in downtown Dallas on a big street, on Main Street. And we had the model walking down the middle of downtown Dallas, and only in Texas could you do this sort of thing. Oh my goodness, it would not fly well in New York, I don't think. But yeah, so it was just such a great production. This was probably the biggest first production that I ever did. And one thing you have to keep in mind when doing these kind of shoots is when you have a team around you, they're all working with you to make amazing images. So I did a lot of networking on Model Mayhem to try to find hair, makeup, wardrobe. Now people use Instagram, obviously. But it's an interesting experience trying to get the team together, but they're all working with you. This was another production for Nikon, and we were in Lake Tahoe, such a beautiful, beautiful location to photograph Sand Harbor. And we had all the photographers out there shooting that sunset to kind of get a really cool vibe for their website. And you know, I do a lot of different things now. I don't just shoot fashion. I shoot a lot of commercial work. This is for a brand called Osadilla Tequila, so it's a tequila brand. So I shoot a lot of advertising. Anything that's basically commercial work is what I shoot. I don't shoot a ton of fine art or anything like that, but I love the commercial work because it's such an interesting experience working with different productions and bringing to life these different brands and the personality of these brands. So this was a recent billboard that I shot for Osadilla Tequila. So such a fun shoot. Lots of great models and talent and whatnot. And so this is a list of my different clients that I like to work with, and it's always growing. It's always, you know, trying to get new and cool clients onto your client list. And you know, ultimately, teamwork really is what makes the dream work. How many guys work with a team? Any of you? Okay, a couple of you guys. Do you try? That's good, that's good. Yeah, keep in mind that I started out with only me and my subject. That is all I started out with. Everything that I've done has been a lot of true grit and networking. I didn't have any connections when I started out, and so it's definitely been trial and error. I did a lot of networking and growing my team on Model Mayhem, like I said, and it just is amazing to me with these different productions how many people that it can take to make them come to life. And this was for that big production for Magpul. And we had quite a large crew for this production because it was a calendar. So we had 13 different shots and we had to get them done within 3 days. And so it was a lot. But everyone kind of is working together for that final image. And that's what I really love. I mean, I played sports growing up, and so I'm very, very much a team player. I love that team aspect, and that's why I think I'm really drawn to fashion and commercial photography. It's just that team aspect and getting together a team of people so you can create something bigger than you could have created alone. And so that's kind of how it works. When commercial clients come to you with a project, they expect that you have a go-to team to work with. And so it's usually not going to just be me and a model unless I'm shooting personal work. With these big productions, it's going to be me, hair and makeup, wardrobe, the models, the producer who basically plans the day. That's my assistant. Gotta love Nico. He's actually my Digitech. Awesome guy. But yeah, so it's kind of a big production that goes into it. And this was actually in Brazil. And beautiful location in Florianopolis. It's a beautiful island off the coast of Brazil, and you know, we get that beautiful gown to kind of flow in the wind. So literally my assistant is on the other side of her just throwing that gown up and down for every shot so that you get that nice flow. Then we had the nice pro photo light behind that tree shining back towards her to create that nice hair light. Pretty much what I do is very simple as far as lighting goes, and I'm going to get a little bit more into lighting, but keeping it very simple. I like the lighting to look more natural than overly lit. That just tends to be more my style. Sorry, I keep hitting my microphone. And so that's how it goes into it. So how many of you guys have a Z9 yet? Any of you? Awesome, this camera is amazing. So I've been shooting with the Z9 for, gosh, about a year now, and very exciting launch. Did you guys hear about the launch today? Yes, woo! I may be the most excited person about this launch because it just applies to so much of what I do. I love the 85-1.2. They just launched this, and I was very, very honored and very excited that Nikon reached out and asked if I would shoot the campaign for this particular lens. And so exciting. I mean, it's such a fun experience when this happens, obviously, but it's interesting because, you know, the lens itself, I love the 1.2 series of lenses. Just that extra light that you get with these lenses is incredible. And this is by far the sharpest, most beautiful lens that I've ever shot, and I can tell you guys I have shot a lot of lenses. I will definitely be owning this whenever it ships, and I've just been blown away by the image quality of this lens. So they actually reached out and they needed the images and final video done in a week. So we had to put this production together in just a week's time. That's always an adventure. So I was trying to find, you know, different locations that would really showcase the bokeh of what this lens is able to capture. So I ended up finding this location on PureSpace. Have you guys ever used PureSpace? Yeah, oh my gosh, it's amazing. I used to use Airbnb, but PureSpace is such a great tool for location rentals. And I actually live in Fort Worth, Texas. How many Texans in here? Any? A couple? Right on. So yeah, I used the PureSpace to find this great location because I really wanted to showcase the bokeh that this lens was able to capture. And so we ended up shooting first in this beautiful room with these Edison bulbs. I wanted to have some in the foreground, some in the background, so you can really capture what this lens, the bokeh that it creates. And I really kind of wanted these first images to look more like an album cover. This is all constant lighting, very simple stuff. We just had a huge constant light source illuminating him in that scene, basically. And then we brought in Birdie, the female model, and she kind of has a really cool look about her, very edgy fashion. Ivy has that amazing hair. I casted him for his hair. He looks incredible. So it kind of has that album cover feel, and you get sort of a cool vibe there. And then I actually found these lights at a vintage shop of mine. It was a big Edison bulb. I ended up replacing some of the smaller Edison bulbs with these big bulbs, and it just kind of created a really neat look about it and vibrance. But you can see how this lens really renders skin tones so beautifully. I mean, I was blown away by this lens. I was shooting tethered, so I was able to zoom in really quickly to see the sharpness. I shot probably 2,000 pictures on this day, and I don't think I saw one that was out of focus, just because of the combination between the Z9, the eye autofocus with the Z9, and this new 85-1.2. I mean, I shot the whole day at 1.2 basically, and that's pretty unheard of. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but as a photographer, I would always be a little bit leery to shoot it at f1.2, you know, the wide open lenses, just because I would be a little worried I would misfocus, you know, when I was doing it myself. But man, the eye autofocus with that 1.2 lens is spot on. I mean, I was pretty blown away, to say the least. So then we did some other setups. I bought this really cool background with a bunch of sequins on it. It was a little bit tricky to set up, but we ended up setting it up, and then we were trying hard to get the bokeh out of it, and so we ended up having to take a fan and just kind of fan the sequence so that they would sparkle in that lighting and create these images. And I used a hair fan for the model's hair. I was thinking kind of a gold on gold look for this particular shot, and then for this one, we had this cool headpiece, you know, just getting super creative, showing that bokeh. I wanted to do silver on silver, so we had a silver background for this particular shot with the silver makeup. And she's a newer model, but she really brought her A game and she really rocked it. But what I love about this lens is the way that the eye is completely in focus and then everything else just sort of falls out of focus really nicely. So I didn't have to do a whole lot of retouching on these particular images just because of the beauty of this lens. Then we moved on to the blue room in this location, and it had some really cool lighting in the background. And then I used this gorgeous gown. Stephen Godou, he's a local designer, one of my favorite designers, and he had this crazy gown that we were able to shoot with that looks almost metallic metal, and we added the ice light in there and a fog machine. How many guys use fog machines on some of your productions? Any of you? Yes. Oh my gosh, they're my favorite. Just the haze adds such a beautiful bokeh and sort of ambiance to the images. So this is one of those shots with that beautiful gown. You know, I'm shooting wide open here. Everything is completely tack sharp, which is just incredible to me. And you've got that blue background and that haze. And I kind of sometimes like to use the lighting in some of the shots, and so we ended up using that here to kind of illuminate her face. That's an ice light of sorts, and I just love these. Kind of have more of a futuristic feel, which is kind of perfect for this futuristic lens, basically. So it was just such a fun day. So this was day one, and then we ended up ending the day. I wanted to test this lens and put it through the paces and really see how it's able to you know, do on the fly. So basically we went down to the Fort Worth stockyards, and there's people everywhere. I'm trying to like hold the lens to make sure no one sees it since it's not released yet. That's always one of the high pressure aspects of shooting for something that isn't released yet. And but we were able to kind of be a little bit incognito and, you know, capture these within about 15 minutes. Ivy kind of posed with this cool background. The Christmas lighting was actually out that day, because it was in December. And what's cool to me is if you stop down at this lens to f2, the bokeh is perfectly round, because it's at f1.2, it's almost round, but f2, it's like perfectly round, so it's a beautiful bokeh. You can see it here come to life in this particular shot, and just blown away by how beautiful that is. But still, I love to shoot it at f1.2, but f2, if you want perfectly round bokeh, that's how you shoot it. So it's just a really work of art lens. And then we got some of Birdie kind of crossing the street, super easy stuff. You know, so I'm thinking about a wedding photographer that's out shooting. They have to work with the available light and see what they can create. I mean, it's incredible, the low light capabilities of this lens, obviously at 1.2. It lets so much light in, it's so beautiful. So just such a fun shoot. Now day two, they wanted me to do a day of fashion and then a day of wedding and portraiture. So we ended up casting a couple of models for this, and I found this cool wedding venue called the Lazy Hacienda. It's like kind of a Spanish style venue, really beautiful location. And so I always like to start with the guy model first, because the female model is usually in hair and makeup for a couple of hours. So just time-wise, it's a good way to start with the guy model. And so we ended up shooting a few shots of him, and I love shooting through windows because they kind of have a really beautiful look about them, and it was amazing how the lens was able to grab focus immediately. Just incredible. Through that window, no big deal. It's just amazing. And then I got some details of the boutonniere, and you can see how a wedding photographer would really utilize this lens as the perfect portrait lens for weddings and portraits. And you know, then the female model came out. This is all natural light. One thing that I like to use is, believe it or not, insulation board as reflectors. Everyone's like, what is she talking about? So basically, instead of just the round reflectors, those are very flimsy in the wind. I like to grab just silver insulation board from the hardware store and kind of bounce that light back into the subject's face, and you can kind of cut a hole in it so you can see through it. You'll see that a lot in my behind the scenes videos. It's a really great, cheap way to build a reflector. It's very simple. And so we use that in almost all of these shots. And this model was amazing. She had this beautiful Stephen Godou dress on. You know, I had her in front of the doors. And one thing to keep in mind, you know, with location work, I shoot so much location work because I feel like the location is really inspiring. And so I will allow the location to dictate where we shoot. So I basically do a look-see the morning of the shoot, or ideally before the shoot. This was such a crunch time. We had to, you know, do this shoot within a week. But we were able to scout the location that morning and pick out those beautiful spots that really stood out to me. And then I look at the wardrobe and then pair the wardrobe with those spots. So think about your location first, pick out the best spots for lighting and for background, and then you can place your model in the wardrobe within those backgrounds to create, you know, the fashion imagery. That's really how my mind works. Yeah. Yeah, so this is actually, that's a good question. Yes, so for this particular shot, this is what I like to call garage lighting. And it's just that light, if you think about think about this being a garage, and the model is standing right here, and the light is just wrapping around the subject, and I'm shooting into the garage. Does that make sense? So that's how this is photographed. And then I added a little bit of a leaf in front of the lens to create that slight haze. Yeah, that's a very good question. So I love to shoot that way, especially female models, because you don't get as much texture. It just lessens any texture of their skin. It just looks really beautiful and comes to life. And so I always love garage light for that reason, just because when you put them in shade and that light wraps around so beautifully. So good question. Yeah, I put a leaf. An actual leaf, yes. I put an actual leaf in front of the lens on the left-hand side to get just a little bit of flare, because I love lens flare, just for that reason. And this camera handles it really well, so it just works pretty nicely. And then we also had a fan for her hair, so you can see that all in this shot. And then we continued. Like I said, she's in shade, and that light is just wrapping around the subject, you know, just doing some different poses and different things. And, you know, got to get some smiley poses. Obviously, if it's supposed to be her wedding day, got to get some smiles, even though high fashion is usually more serious type of looks, but I like the smiles as well. And, you know, I like to get kind of candid a little bit with the models, kind of. I don't overly pose the models when I shoot. I tend to shoot through moments in order to get the shots that I'm looking for. And, you know, with these different productions, in shooting digital now, you can kind of overshoot things if you have to. And it's very strategic in the way that I do it, because when the model hears that click, they know that they're doing a good job. So I might kind of overshoot in order to get the shots that I'm looking for. But that really is the beauty of the digital cameras these days, being able to shoot and really capture those specific moments that really feel natural and unposed, because there's nothing I hate worse than an overly posed picture. I just like things to look very effortless, very easy, like they were just in that moment. You just happen to capture that moment. So I'm always shooting through those moments in order to get what I'm looking for. This one is actually not even retouched. This is straight out of the camera. So you can really get a sense of how beautiful this lens renders skin tones and sharpness. And I couldn't say enough good things about it. You can see it 100% zoomed in. You can see every single eyelash, and it's phenomenal. But what's nice about it is, you know, a lot of lenses, they're almost overly sharp on the skin, whereas if you're shooting this at 1.2, the eyelashes are going to be super tack, and the eye's going to be super tack, and everything else just falls out of focus really beautifully. It's so creamy. So it just saves a lot of time in retouching and post-production, which is always good, because I am definitely more of a shooter, less post-production. I like to keep it really simple and do as little post-production as possible, so it makes it simple and easy. And then getting those details, those wedding details. This is all natural light, very simple stuff. And getting the ring shot. You know, it's nice how the ring is really in focus and everything else falls out of focus really beautifully. And, you know, just getting the couple together. It's always interesting working with models who have never met, and then they have to be a couple. So it's always an adventure. Like, sometimes there's chemistry, and then sometimes there's not chemistry. So you got to kind of roll with it a little bit. These two, in these shots, they look like they have some cute chemistry, but it was definitely, had never even met before. So that's always fun. But I love to get the music playing. That's really, really important. When we're not shooting video on set, we're allowed to have the music going, because I'm going to end up putting music onto the behind-the-scenes film. And then I always have food on set. How many of you guys get super hangry when you're starving? Yeah, me too. So you always, always, always want to have food on set. That's such a big thing. And then I always like to have their favorite music playing when they arrive, just to set them at ease, set the tone for the day. And sometimes if we're moving behind, I'll play really intense, fast music, and then we'll kind of speed up. And if we want to kind of slow it down a little bit, I'll play a little bit slower music. So I'm all about the music. I was a saxophone player, obviously, and I love the music aspect of photography. It's such a big part of it. And then there was one shot that I wanted to really capture, this bokeh. So this was in front of the main part of the building with the doors in the background. So I just moved. I was like in the cactuses. I was trying not to get bloody the cactuses, basically, to shoot this image. But I really wanted to frame the couple here and just really capture that bokeh within this particular shot. So it ended up pretty cool. I like how that one turned out. And then that headshot, I'm such a fan of the 105mm for headshots, but I think that this 85 might have converted me to loving the 85 more for headshots now. It's just such a hard choice. They're both amazing lenses, but just the bokeh on this particular lens is so beautiful. Very little retouching needed. She has that beautiful feather or flower headdress. So we shot a few here, and believe it or not, the lighting was really good at this spot. However, that is actually the parking lot in the background. But that's really the beauty of shooting the 85-1.2 lens, is everything else is just gonna go creamy. So you really don't know what your background is gonna be, which is really nice if you're not blessed with the perfect location or background. Because sometimes the lighting is amazing, but the background's not so beautiful, but this lens kind of solves that. So it works out really well. So here's just an example. I always like to bring this up. I used to shoot a lot of headshots with the 50mm, and I wasn't getting the kind of results that I was really looking for. It kind of just wasn't as flattering. And so I started moving to like the 85 and even higher, and I noticed that there was such a beautiful compression effect with those longer focal length lenses, and it just is a lot more flattering. You'll see with the 35, her nose is distorted, her forehead is a little bit distorted. It's not quite as beautiful as a look. But you move on to that 85 and it's all of a sudden comes to life. It's really beautiful. And then if you want even more compression, you can go even longer. But I think the 85 is probably 85 or 105, you can't go wrong with portrait lenses for headshots, especially for fashion photography. Keep in mind, I only had the 50mm and the D70 camera when I started. So I've grown my equipment list and everything since I've grown my career. And we ended up ending the day doing some shots with this horse, really beautiful. I love animals, and bringing them into the frame, and just such a fun shoot. And you kind of get those leading lines with the road, and with that 1.2, it just blurs out everything in the background, looks really nice. And then I wanted to get a close-up with the model and the horse, obviously. You gotta get that in there. And this was actually a blue-eyed horse. I've never seen that before. It's pretty cool, pretty beautiful. And we wanted her against the door to capture those beautiful textures. So even at 1.2, you're still gonna get some beautiful textures, especially for a full-length type of shot. It's really beautiful. So, whoops. And then we ended the shoot doing some product stuff. So shooting just the lens on the camera, product stuff with the cool bokeh in the background. And then we also I produced a behind the scenes film from this entire shoot. And I would love to share that with you guys today, so you guys can kind of see exactly how we created all of these different setups and putting the lens through the paces. So I'd love to show you guys that. Oh, is the sound on? There we go, thank you.
About to change.
All right. Thank you, guys. Y'all are so awesome. Thank you so much. That was such a fun shoot, such a joy to create, and such a fun crew to work with. And you know, lately I've been doing a lot of different shoots with animals, and I thought that I would kind of share some of these as well, just for fun's sake. And one thing about working with animals, you have to be really careful not to use perfume. Because they can sense that, and you got to be really comfortable. Animals can smell a lot of fear, so you have to work with models that are very comfortable around animals. And this has kind of been a current project that I've been working on. And you know, working that kind of beautiful connection between the models and the beasts of our planet. This has become a new passion of mine, working with these animals. So any shoot that I have, I'm always trying to add an animal to it, just to capture that cool fashion photography, but with the beautiful beasts of our planet. So I love black and whites. If I had any choice, I would have my whole portfolio, I think, in black and white. How many of you guys love black and whites? Oh my gosh, just they speak to my soul. I feel like you get more to the soul of the person that you're photographing in black and white, as opposed to color. You're more distracted by the clothes, which can be good, obviously, if it's for a fashion brand or company, obviously. But I just love that aspect. And this was actually, believe it or not, in Denton, Texas. This is an orphan giraffe that's been adopted by a friend of mine, and he takes care of all of these beautiful orphaned animals. And this giraffe's name is actually Gerald, and he has a new wife named Harriet. I mean, what a character. I mean, he was amazing, amazing animal to work with. He loved the camera. He was kind of like posing in all of the shots, just kind of working that camera. He really loved the attention. It was such a surreal experience because the model and the giraffe are shot in the same frame. There was a fence in the background we had to edit out and whatnot, so the background is tweaked, but everything else was shot exactly in camera. I love creating in camera as much as possible because I don't like to spend a ton of time in post-production. But yeah, Gerald is an amazing, amazing giraffe to work with, and so I'm probably going to go back there and shoot again soon, just because it's just so unique to get to work with these different animals. So we've worked with zebras, giraffes, mountain lions. That was a little bit scary, working with a mountain lion. So many crazy animals. I haven't worked with a lion yet, but I plan to. It's just so much fun. So this is kind of like my location kit. I have this Manfrotto backpack, and then I load it up with all my different lenses. I mainly shoot prime lenses, and I do own a couple of zooms, but the primes are definitely my favorite. This is a look at my camera bag. And one thing that was interesting to me, I started realizing that I was shuffling through my camera bag a lot to find different, I couldn't like find different lenses, and I was kind of rushed during shoots, and I had a hard time finding which lens I was looking for. So I was like, you know what, why don't I create some lens labels so I can easily grab the different lenses when I go and see what I need, and everything is laid out in my camera bag, so everything is super easy to find. And so I created these lens caps, and they're indestructible labels that you just stick onto the back of your cap, so everything is perfectly labeled in your camera bag, and they're waterproof, shockproof, so they've worked really well. So I just actually created these. The website is not launched yet, but it's really helped me for a lot of my shoots, and then I had assistants asking me to make them some for each of my assistants, so I was like, well, you know what, maybe I should just create these and launch these. So these will be launching in a few weeks if you guys need to know which lens you're looking for in your camera bag, but they're really kind of fun and makes it super easy to find which lens you're looking for. So I do a lot of shoots with different horses. This is Landry, one of my favorite models to shoot. She's amazing to work with. Keep in mind she's not moving. We're actually just using a hair fan to blow her hair to make it, give it some movement. And you can see how this works here. It's actually not even a real hair fan. We use what we call a leaf blower. So, amazing tool. It's just incredible. Don't use the plug-in leaf blowers. Those are way too powerful, but the battery-operated ones are the perfect amount of wind for the hair. So I use those a lot to create that. Sorry, I don't think B&H carries these, unfortunately, but the hair fan is amazing. I like the Makita brand. I don't know why, it just seems to be the one that works best for us. It's not too powerful. What'd you say?
Hardware store around the corner.
Yes, hardware store around the corner, exactly. I do love me a good hardware store, you know, whatever works. For sure. So you can capture that kind of hair, you know, in the wind, which is really nice. We did a recent shoot with zebras, and I thought the zebras were going to be a lot taller than they were, and actually the model towered over to the zebra. Oops, sorry, towered over the zebras, and I did not expect that. But you know, you just roll with it and you create. These are all like personal shoots that I plan to use on a new book that I'm launching, and you know, they're kind of fun. This zebra was named Zach. He was very easy to shoot, very good on camera. You have to not make any sudden movements when working with animals. That's really key because they get spooked easily. So you got to move really slow, very calm-like when you're working with animals. And it's just so much fun. And they're taken such good care of. That's what I really love. And I've actually sold a lot of my prints for proceeds to go to this orphanage of these animals. So it works, you know, best for both worlds. We get cool pictures, and it goes to the animals. And you know, I love a big hat. I'm such a huge hat nerd. I'm always wearing a hat whenever I shoot. It's kind of like my photo shoot wardrobe. And so I'm always putting hats on all of the fashion models that we photograph. Just so much fun. And I love a good close-up. You can kind of see the texture of the model here and everything. It's just so beautiful. We actually shot with a wolf in Montana. That was crazy cool. Yeah, that was so much fun. This is actually a collaboration with David Yarrow. He's an amazing Nikon Ambassador of the UK. And he said, Dixie, I want you to bring the models, I'm gonna bring the animals. And then we collaborated on some different shots in Montana. And it was such an honor to work with him and so much fun. And this wolf was actually just like a big dog. It was super cool. I mean, I wasn't really scared of this particular wolf. He was very much like a dog, and I love dogs. So he does look kind of scary the way we've placed him, though, with Roxanne, the model. Roxanne is amazing. She's one of my favorite models because she is game for anything. I mean, we had her with mountain lions, all these different animals, and she is so on it. She just is really confident and peaceful with all of these different animals. And then so I decided that we had to get her, since I'm from Texas, we had to get her with a longhorn. And this longhorn's name is Flash, and amazing longhorn. And what's so interesting about this is the owner of the longhorns she's an amazing soul. And she said that when she got a divorce, when she was very young, her husband wouldn't pay child support. And instead, he gifted her these longhorns to make a living, basically having people take pictures with the longhorns. I was like, wow, that is a crazy story. So anyway, so that's what she's been doing for the past like 20 or 30 years is she rents these longhorns out for different photo shoots, and she's made a lot of money doing that. It was just such an interesting like backstory on how this all came to be. So this is one of her favorite longhorns, Flash. And he works out really well. He's really photogenic. He's cool with the flash, so we were able to use strobes on this particular shoot in some of the shots. This one's actually natural light and just with a reflector in the front, but it's very, you know, punchy, and you know, I'm always trying to figure out what the best f-stop and stuff to shoot for these animal shots. And a lot of times I'll stop down to like f5.6 just so that I can get both the animal and the model in focus. Now when I'm shooting portraits, I like to shoot pretty wide open, like with that new 85, I like to shoot that at 1.2. If there's an animal involved, I like to get the model and the animal in focus, so I'll stop down to like f5.6. So it really kind of just depends on what we're shooting. This is in the middle of the Fort Worth stockyards, in the middle of the Rona season. Obviously the craziness we've been through the past couple years, but what was so crazy was the streets are usually so busy, and during the coronavirus stuff, there was no one on these streets. So I was like, what a perfect time to create these images because it's very desolate, there's no one out, we can go and create and bring a longhorn down the middle of the street and not even have to get a location release. So it was a pretty amazing shoot. We had a great stylist involved, and it just kind of has that. This is actually what I used on my postcards to send out to clients at the beginning of the year. So it was a really fun production. And so I've been doing a lot of other things like silhouettes lately. I wanted to create some art for my walls, and so I've been doing a lot of these. and just creating some fun shapes. You can see it's just 2 lights in the background, very simple stuff. And you can see here how we were just trying some different poses, and let's see. She's kind of moving. That was a dress from my closet that I'd obviously never worn, and just creates a cool thing. And we actually didn't have a hat to use, so I ended up using a reflector for the hat. But since it's a silhouette, you can't really tell. So we just get in the studio and create. And gosh, that's what I've been doing since I was 12 years old, just getting in the studio, creating, seeing what happens. And that's really how I've built my career, because the thing is about fashion photography, you really have to show the type of work that you want to be shooting. So you can't just get fashion photography jobs without having the work to show. So you got to show and go out and shoot that beautiful personal work, and then show that to as many art directors, as many photo editors, creative directors as possible. And then you'll start attracting that fashion kind of work with brands and ad agencies and whatnot. So that's what we do. We try to shoot personal work at least once a month. And I'll get my team together and we'll create some cool personal work, and then we'll send that out to potential clients and whatnot. So it becomes a really fun process. My assistant, that's his firearm, but he loves the kind of Western vibe. So we did these very, very Western style type of shots with the kind of James Bond Western fashion. So just such a fun shoot. And then I'm trying to think how much time I have. Okay, I have a little time. So we'll end with this ballerina shoot that I did. Yeah, I have 10 minutes. Perfect. And I wanted to get some really beautiful shots of her, this beautiful ballerina. She's amazing to work with. And so I ended up grabbing a mirror from Home Depot and just having her kind of lay on the mirror. We used strobe here, just right on camera, just one strobe. Very, very simple stuff. And we did a bunch of different kind of poses with the mirror. It was a little tricky because we started out with just one long mirror from the hardware store, and it wasn't quite wide enough, so we had to go back to the hardware store and get another one to kind of put it in there to create these different shots. But they turned out really cool, just really kind of artistic ballerina type of images. And we're able to use this for personal work. And then I love doing an intentional blur, so I kind of extended my shutter speed. I believe I shot this at like a 15th of a second to create that intentional blur, which is really beautiful. She didn't have any of her ballerina outfits, so I had to source them just from Etsy and Amazon. And sometimes I end up doing the wardrobe styling if we don't have the luxury of having a wardrobe stylist. But ideally, we have a wardrobe stylist. And then this was a really fun process. We used actually flour to create these nice kind of things in the sky so she would have it in her hands, and then she would just do the poses and kind of let out that flour. So we bought, I think, like 10 bags of flour for this, and we destroyed the studio. And it actually isn't even my studio. I felt kind of bad. It's my friend Eric Clapp's studio. He's a great videographer. And this was my favorite because it kind of reminds me of an angel, like angel wings. And we had the blue ballerina outfit, and she's just throwing that flower out. We had to try so many different things in order to get the right flow on the flower. But this ended up being the favorite shot from that particular series that we did. And it was really beautiful. Then I ended this day with shooting just some vintage stuff. This is actually an outfit that I bought in Paris when I was in Paris last time. And it looks very different on me because I'm very short, but it looks amazing on this particular fashion model. And I actually bought that hat as well in Paris. And so we just had to shoot some sort of fine art looking vintage fashion. I love everything vintage. Vintage just speaks to my soul, especially with black and white photography. It's just really, really beautiful. And I'd love to show you guys a quick video from this and then end on that. Alrighty. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions or anything? Yeah.
You've got a real big mic.
Oh, great. Perfect. Thank you. Hi.
Your work is amazing.
Oh, thank you.
I got a question.
Yeah.
So, as I was looking at your work, your compositional work is like really phenomenal. The color choice and the way that you frame your subjects are like borderline paintings. Like,
Yeah.
how did you get that? How did you develop that style?
Is it my microphone? Sorry. I thought it was yours. Our microphones are interacting.
Yeah.
Could you repeat the end of that? I'm so sorry.
So your photos are like paintings, right?
Oh,
how did
thank
you develop that style?
Yeah, gosh, that's such a good question. You know, I always feel like your style is not something that you have to go out and find or copy or anything like that. It's really something that already exists within you. You just have to look, if you look through magazines and look for certain images that really speak to your soul and your heart, that's what I would do. I was always looking through magazines, and I would see certain images that really spoke to my heart and my soul, and then I would dissect those images and think about, okay, what lighting are they using? What kind of talent are they using? What kind of hair and makeup? And so I would look at the different elements and pick out which elements within those photographs that really spoke to my heart, and then I would create a mood board with those particular shots and then try to basically recreate my own version of those from the different mood board. And that's kind of how I've done it, just from trial and error and shooting so much and just really trying to figure out what really speaks to my soul as opposed to trying to be trendy or anything like that. I think it's more about figuring out what you love, like what kind of lighting do you like, what kind of locations really speak to your heart. You definitely got to go out and shoot those, but it takes a couple of years, I think, to find out and discover that. Does that answer your question? It's such a hard thing to describe, but style, it's ever evolving, you know? It's one thing that is ever evolving, but when you look back at your pictures over about 5 or 10 years, you're gonna discover that you do certain things over and over and over again that are very much you, and you're gonna see those over and over and over again in your work, and that becomes your style, basically. Yeah, absolutely.
We have another one here.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, hi.
Hi. Question for you. You brought up many times that you work collaboratively with a team.
Yeah.
Could you speak a little bit about the challenges and even some of the ways that the creative process has gone through that?
Absolutely. Yeah, when I started out, I mean, I was doing the hair, the makeup, the wardrobe, the styling. Oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe how many photo shoots I overstyled. I would have like 20 props in there. I mean, it was kind of crazy, but working with the right team, you definitely have to work with people who, well, in my opinion, I'm a very much energy person. I can feel the energy in a room before I even step into a room. And so I'm very, very careful about the energy and controlling that energy, because if you have really bad energy within a portrait shoot, it's going to really show on the model's face or a portrait client that you're photographing. So that's why I'm very careful to always keep that positive energy flowing, and I'm constantly complimenting the model, complimenting the hair and makeup at the job that they're doing. I'm just keeping that real positive energy flow so that we can all create together. I've had some crew members before, you know, before I got the crew that I work with now that could be more negative and that would belittle the model, and all those things do not work on my set. I don't allow that sort of energy on my set because it really draws people's energy levels down. So I'm very, very picky about who I allow on the different productions, and my crew, I mean, it's taken years and years and years for me to find them, but now that I've found them, like my producer, my lighting tech, and hair and makeup, we basically don't even have to speak. It's almost like we just have such a great energy and flow of working together that we just work really well together. But it takes a little while to find those people. And you just got to keep trying different crews, trying different folks that you like to work with until you find the crew that really inspires you creatively. So, does that answer your question enough? Yeah. Okay. Okay, cool. Thank you. Awesome.
Okay, awesome.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Dixie.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wait.